Alpha Queen entered the shadowed keep, until the lunar wolf dog revealed, who waited inside. I was pregnant with a man whose face I loved in the darkness, but whose name I couldn't scream in the light of day. Or was it the other one? The knight whose eyes followed me through the castle halls, but whose hands could never touch me where everyone could see. The truth was I didn't know, and that terrified me. The silk sheets were cold against my skin when I woke that morning, the scent of lavender from the linens making my stomach turn in ways that had nothing to do with the oppressive fragrance my husband insisted upon. King Aldrich lay beside me, his back a wall of indifference, his breathing the steady rhythm of a man who slept soundly because he felt nothing. 5 years of marriage, 5 years of lying in this bed that felt more like a gilded cage than a place of rest, and the space between us had only grown wider. There was no mate bond humming between us, no invisible thread pulling my soul toward his, just cold silk, colder duty, and the suffocating smell of flowers I'd learned to hate. I pressed my hand to my abdomen, feeling nothing yet, but knowing. The nausea that had been creeping up on me for the past 2 weeks wasn't from bad food or stress. It was life, a tiny spark of it, growing inside me. And the father? I squeezed my eyes shut, forcing down the panic that rose like bile in my throat. It wasn't Aldrich. We hadn't touched each other in months, both of us finding excuses to avoid the mechanical coupling that produced nothing but disappointment and whispered doubts from the court. The weight of my crown sat on the vanity across the room, gold and sapphires gleaming in the morning light that filtered through the heavy curtains. I could feel its weight, even from here, pressing down on my skull like a constant reminder of everything I owed this kingdom, everything I was failing to give them. The breakfast hall was worse than the bedroom. The long table stretched before me, nobles and council members seated along its length, their eyes tracking my every movement as I took my place beside Aldrich. The king ate without looking at me, cutting his meat with precise, measured movements that somehow felt like accusations. I reached for my tea, the jasmine scent making my stomach lurch, and I had to set it down immediately, my hand trembling. "No appetite this morning, Your Majesty," Lord Brennan's voice carried down the table, polite on the surface but sharp underneath. "You've seemed rather delicate lately." I felt every eye turn toward me, the weight of their stares, their expectations, their judgment. 5 years. 5 barren years while neighboring kingdoms produced heirs, while whispers of cursed womb and failed queen echoed through corridors I wasn't supposed to hear. "I'm quite well, Lord Brennan," I said, my voice steady even as another wave of nausea rolled through me. I was an alpha, damn it. I'd led warriors into battle, negotiated peace treaties, held this kingdom together while my husband spent his days hunting and his nights drinking. I wouldn't let them see me falter over a cup of tea. Aldrich finally looked at me then, his gray eyes cold. "Perhaps we should consult the healers again," he said, his tone suggesting this was more command than concern. 5 years is quite long enough to wait for an heir, wouldn't you agree? The humiliation burned through me, hot and acidic. I wanted to scream that maybe the problem wasn't me, that maybe his cold disinterest extended to more than just conversation. But I swallowed the words, nodded gracefully, and excused myself before the nausea became impossible to hide. I barely made it to my private chambers before I was sick, retching into the basin while my lady's maid held my hair back with gentle hands. When I could finally breathe again, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. Nyx Ravenclaw, Alpha Queen of the Northern Territories, reduced to this. Pale skin, dark circles under storm-gray eyes, hair the color of midnight falling in tangles around my shoulders. And inside me, a secret that could destroy everything. The training yard was my escape, had been for months now. The clash of steel on steel, the burn of muscles pushed to their limits, the sharp focus required to not get killed. It was the only place I could forget the weight of the crown, the emptiness of my marriage, the impossible situation I'd created for myself. Cale Ironheart was already there when I arrived, stripped to the waist despite the cool morning air, his scarred torso glistening with sweat as he moved through sword forms with deadly precision. Captain of the Royal Guard, the king's most trusted warrior, and the man who made my traitorous heart race every time I saw him. He looked up when I entered, those amber eyes catching mine and holding. There was something feral in that gaze, something that called to the wolf inside me, even though I fought it every day. The mate bond hummed between us, a living thing that had snapped into place 6 months ago during a late-night strategy meeting, and I'd been running from it ever since. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice rough, He never called me Nix when we were alone, as if the formality could somehow maintain the distance we both knew was crumbling. Should you be training in your condition? My blood went cold. My condition? You seem tired. He moved closer, and I could smell him, leather and steel, and something earthy that made my wolf want to roll in his scent. You've been pale, distracted. I worry. Don't. The word came out sharper than I intended. I grabbed a practice sword from the rack, needing something to do with my hands, needing the familiar weight of a weapon to ground me. I'm fine, and I need to keep my skills sharp. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded and took his position across from me. We'd been doing this for months, these training sessions that were equal parts combat practice and elaborate dance of tension. Every time our blades met, every time he corrected my stance with those large, calloused hands, every time I saw the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't watching, it was torture. Beautiful, addictive torture. We moved through the forms, circling each other, blades singing. He was stronger, but I was faster, and we'd learned each other's rhythms so well that sometimes it felt like we were one person split into two bodies. When he finally disarmed me, his blade at my throat, and his body pressed against my back to prevent my escape, we both froze. You're distracted, he murmured against my ear, his breath hot on my neck. Something's wrong. Tell me. His hand slid to my hip, steadying me, and the touch sent fire through my veins. This was dangerous. So dangerous. He was my subordinate. I was married to his king, and yet, "You look exhausted, my queen," he said, and there was something in his voice that made me shiver. His hand moved, just slightly, brushing against my stomach. Should I be concerned? I jerked away from him, my heart hammering. He couldn't know. No one could know. Not until I figured out whose child I carried. Not until I'm fine, I repeated, but my voice shook. I need air. I practically ran from the training yard, his amber eyes burning into my back. The forest was freedom. It always had been, even before everything became so complicated. I slipped out through the hidden passage in the east wing, the one only I and a handful of trusted servants knew about, and wrapped myself in a plain woolen cloak that smelled of herbs, sage and rosemary, strong enough to mask my royal scent, to make me just another shifter in the woods. Here, I wasn't Queen Nix Ravenclaw. Here, I was Raven, a lone wolf running from an arranged marriage she never wanted. It was the lie I'd told 6 months ago when I'd first stumbled into these woods, desperate for escape, and met him, Kieran. Just thinking his name made my chest tight with something that felt dangerously like joy. He was waiting for me in our usual spot, a small clearing where sunlight filtered through the canopy in golden shafts, turning the moss-covered ground into something magical. He sat on a fallen log, whittling something with his knife, but he looked up the moment I approached, his face breaking into that easy smile that had captured me from the first moment. "There's my little Raven," he said, standing to meet me. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of lean muscle that came from a life spent outdoors. His hair was dark and unruly, falling into those amber eyes that were so warm, so different from the way Cale looked at me with restrained hunger. This was open affection, unguarded and free. I was starting to think you'd forgotten about me. Never, I breathed. And then I was in his arms, his mouth on mine, his hands tangling in my hair. He smelled like pine and earth and wild things, and kissing him felt like coming home to a place I'd never been. He walked me backward until my back hit a tree, his body pressing against mine, and for a few perfect moments, I forgot everything. The crown, the court, the complicated mess I'd made of my life. There was just this, his hands exploring beneath my cloak, his lips trailing down my neck, the mate bond singing between us. Wait, the mate bond. The same bond I felt with Cale. I'd been trying not to think about it, trying to convince myself I was imagining it, that the stress and the secret life were making me confused. But here, with Kieran's teeth grazing my throat in the spot where a mate would mark me, I couldn't deny it anymore. The pull was identical, the same humming rightness, the same sense of completion, the same desperate need to be claimed and to claim in return. It was impossible. Mate bonds didn't work like that. One alpha, one omega, one bond. That was the law written into our very DNA by the moon goddess herself. So what the hell was wrong with me? Raven. Kieran pulled back, his brow furrowed with concern. You tensed up. Are you all right? I forced a smile, running my hands up his chest to his shoulders. I'm fine. Just distracted. By what? He tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. the gesture so tender it made my throat tight. "You seem different today. Your scent." He leaned in, breathing deep at my throat, and I saw the exact moment realization hit him. His eyes widened, his hands moving to my waist. "Raven, your scent. It's sweeter, richer. You're pregnant," I whispered, because there was no point in lying. Not to him. Not when shifter senses could detect the change in my chemistry. The joy that flooded his face was almost painful to witness. "We're having a pup?" He laughed, the sound bright and disbelieving, and spun me around. "Raven, when did you— how long have you known?" "Not long," I managed, even as guilt threatened to choke me, because I couldn't tell him the truth. Couldn't say that I didn't know if the child was his, or belonged to another man I'd been foolish enough to love. "Kieran, we need to be careful. If anyone finds out before I can make you mine properly." He set me down, but kept his hands on my waist, his expression turning serious. "Raven, I know you're scared. I know you're running from whatever arrangement your family tried to force on you. But this changes things. Our pup deserves a father. You deserve a mate who's not afraid to claim you in the light of day." My heart stuttered. "Kieran, I'm meeting with my brother next week," he continued, his excitement building. "Kale's the captain of the Royal Guard at the Northern Castle. He has connections, influence. He can help us get documentation, make our mating legal and binding. No one will be able to force you into an unwanted marriage if you're already bonded to me." The world tilted. Brother. Kale's brother. I'd been so careful never to ask about his family, never to share details about mine, keeping our forest meetings separate from reality, and he'd done the same, respecting what he thought was my need for privacy. "Your brother's name is Kale?" My voice sounded distant to my own ears. "Yeah, haven't seen him in a few months. Duty keeps him busy at the castle. But he'd do anything for me. He'll help us, Raven. I promise." He kissed my forehead, then my lips, then knelt and pressed a kiss to my still flat stomach. "I'm going to be a father," he murmured against my skin. "I'm going to give you the life you deserve." I stood frozen as he held me, my mind racing. Kale and Kieran, brothers, twins probably, given how similar their features were, those identical amber eyes. And I'd been sleeping with both of them, loving both of them, feeling the mate bond with both of them. This couldn't be happening. "I should go," I said abruptly, pulling away. "Before someone notices I'm gone." Kieran stood, confusion flickering across his face. "Already? But you just got here." "I know. I'm sorry. There's something I need to handle." I was backing away, my heart hammering against my ribs. "I'll come back soon. I promise." "Raven, wait." But I was already running, crashing through the undergrowth, not caring about the noise I made. I needed to get back to the castle. Needed to think. Needed to figure out what the hell I was going to do. My chambers felt like a cage when I returned, stripping off the common clothes and washing the forest smell from my skin with rose water that made my stomach turn. I stood in front of my mirror, staring at my reflection, seeing a stranger. Who was I? The dutiful queen? The secret lover in the forest? The woman caught between two brothers who would tear each other apart when they discovered the truth? The knock at my door made me jump. "My lady," Mira, my most trusted servant, entered with a sealed letter. "This just arrived." The messenger said it was urgent. I recognized the seal immediately. A raven in flight. Black wax. Darius Shadowbane's mark. He was a shadow in the court. A man who seemed to know everything but revealed little. Who'd been helping me navigate the political minefield since my arrival 5 years ago. If he was reaching out now, it meant he knew. Somehow, he knew. I broke the seal with trembling fingers and read, "Your Majesty, the situation you find yourself in requires immediate action. The lunar wolf dog at Shadowed Keep possesses ancient magic. He can read bloodlines, determine paternity with certainty. Go at dawn, before your condition becomes visible to the court. Discretion is paramount. The truth you seek awaits in the shadows. DS. A way out. A way to know for certain whose child I carried. If it was Kale's, I could— what? Confess to him? Admit I'd been living a double life? If it was Kieran's, I could run with him. Disappear into the forest. Abandon my crown and my duty and— No. I was a queen. I didn't run. But I needed to know. Needed to understand what was happening to me. Why I felt the mate bond with both brothers. Which one was truly meant to be mine. I would go to Shadowed Keep at dawn. I would find this mystical creature. And I would finally have answers. I was pacing my chambers, planning the journey, when I heard them. Voices in the corridor outside my door. low and intense. Male voices, familiar voices. I pressed my ear to the door, my heart stopping. "Can't keep this from you anymore, brother?" That was Kieran, his usual easy tone strained. "I've met someone, a woman. She's Kyle. She's everything. And she's pregnant. With my pup." Silence. Then Kale's voice, tight and controlled. "Where did you meet her?" "In the forest. She's been running from an arranged marriage, hiding her identity. Calls herself Raven. I know it's not her real name, but I don't care. I love her, and I want you to help me protect her." Another pause. Longer this time. When Kale spoke again, his voice was strange. "Describe her. Dark hair, gray eyes like storm clouds. There's this way she moves, like she's always ready to fight or flee. A scar on her left shoulder, shaped like a crescent moon. And her scent," Kieran's voice softened. "Pine and steel, and something wild that makes my wolf crazy." "Why?" "Because," Kale said slowly, and I could hear something breaking in his voice, something that mirrored the fracturing happening in my chest. "I think I know who your Raven is. And brother, we need to talk. Now." I slid down the door until I was sitting on the floor, my hand pressed over my mouth to keep from making a sound. They knew, or they were about to know. The two brothers, the two men I loved, were standing on the other side of this door, about to realize that the woman they'd both fallen for, the woman carrying a child that belonged to one of them, was the same person. The queen who trained with one in the light of day, the shifter who loved the other in the shadows of the forest. And tomorrow, I would journey to Shadowed Keep to discover which one fate had truly chosen for me. If the revelation waiting on the other side of my door didn't destroy us all first. I was riding toward the truth, but the truth was already chasing me, in the hooves of 2 horses, in the beating of 2 hearts, and I prayed that the Lunar wolf dog's magic could save me before the brothers discovered that the queen and the wolf were the same woman destroying their lives. Dawn came too early, painting the sky in shades of blood and amber, as I slipped through the servants' entrance dressed in traveling leathers that wouldn't mark me as royalty. I'd left a letter on my desk, sealed with my personal crest, claiming urgent business with the Southern Alliance. Aldrich wouldn't question it. He never did when I gave him excuses to avoid my company. Mira had helped me pack light, her knowing eyes seeing too much but saying nothing, as she pressed a small pouch of dried ginger root into my hands for the nausea. The stable master was still half asleep when I took my mare, a dappled gray named Storm, who'd carried me through enough midnight escapes to know the meaning of silence. Her breath steamed in the cold air as I led her through the postern gate, and for a moment, standing there with the castle at my back and the unknown road ahead, I felt something like peace. It lasted exactly as long as it took for me to remember why I was running. The landscape shifted as I rode east toward Shadowed Keep, golden wheat fields giving way to darker forests, where the trees grew so thick they blocked out the rising sun. The scent changed too, from the sweet grass and wildflowers of the open country to the deeper, older smell of moss and decay and things that had been growing in darkness for centuries. Storm's hooves were nearly silent on the carpet of fallen leaves, and in that quiet, my mind wouldn't stop replaying memories I should have been strong enough to lock away. Kale's hands on my waist during that tournament 3 months ago, steadying me when I'd stumbled after too much wine. The way he'd looked at me in the torchlight, his amber eyes dark with something that made my stomach flip, and how he'd leaned in close enough that I could smell the leather of his armor mixed with his own warm scent. "If you were anyone else," he'd whispered, his thumb brushing just below my ribs, "I would," but someone had called his name, and the moment shattered, leaving only aching possibility. Then Kieran's laugh echoing through the forest the first time we'd made love, stars visible through the canopy above us, and his body warm against mine as he traced the crescent moon scar on my shoulder with gentle fingers. "You're so beautiful like this," he'd murmured, "wild and free, exactly as you were meant to be." And I'd believed him because in that moment, I wasn't a queen with duties and crowns and impossible choices. I was just Raven, a woman who could love without consequences. Except there were always consequences. The nausea hit me hard around midday, forcing me to dismount in an undignified scramble and lose what little breakfast I'd managed to choke down behind a massive oak tree. I knelt there in the dirt, one hand braced against the rough bark, and the other pressed to my still flat abdomen, feeling the emptiness of my stomach and the fullness of my guilt. "Who are you, little one?" I whispered to the life growing inside me. "Which father gave you those amber eyes you'll probably have? Which one gave you the strength I already feel and how hard you're making your mother's life?" I laughed, but it came out bitter. Your father is a good man. Both of them are. Different kinds of good, different kinds of strong, but good nonetheless. And that's what destroys me. If one of them were cruel, if one were unworthy, the choice would be easier, but they're not. They're brothers who love each other, and I'm the poison that's going to tear them apart. Storm nickered softly, her ears swiveling backward, and my wolf senses prickled with awareness a second before I heard them. Hoofbeats, fast, coming from the direction of the castle. I was on my feet and reaching for Storm's reins when they burst through the tree line. 2 riders on horses pushed too hard, foam flecking their mounts' necks. My heart stopped because I knew them before I saw their faces. Knew them by the way they sat their horses, by the breadth of their shoulders, by the identical amber gleam of their eyes even at a distance. Kale and Kieran. They pulled up short when they saw me, their horses dancing and snorting, and for a frozen moment, we all just stared at each other across the clearing. I still had my hood up, my cloak wrapped tight, but I could see the recognition dawning in Kieran's eyes even before Kyle spoke. Your Majesty. Kale's voice was controlled, formal, the voice of the captain of the guard addressing his queen, but there was something underneath it, something raw and barely leashed. It's dangerous to travel alone. We came to protect you. Kieran was off his horse in a flash, striding toward me with confusion written all over his face. Raven? What are you doing this far from the forest? And why is he... He stopped, really looking at me for the first time, his gaze catching on the quality of my boots, the sword at my hip that was too fine for a common shifter, the way even in traveling clothes I couldn't quite hide what I was. Why is he calling you Your Majesty? My hood fell back. I don't know if I pulled it down or if the wind caught it, but suddenly my hair was spilling over my shoulders, catching the filtered sunlight, and both of them could see my face completely. No shadows to hide in, no lies left to tell. The silence that followed was the kind that comes before thunder. Kale dismounted slowly, his movements careful, controlled, like he was approaching a spooked animal, or a bomb about to detonate. His eyes moved between Kieran and me, and I watched him put the pieces together, watched the exact moment he understood. The woman you described last night, he said to his brother, his voice so quiet it was almost gentle. Dark hair, storm gray eyes, a scar on her left shoulder shaped like a crescent moon. He looked at me, and there was devastation in his gaze. It's her. You're Raven. She's the queen. Kieran's voice broke on the word. He took a step back from me like I'd burned him, his hand going to his chest as if he could physically hold his heart together. You're Queen Nyx. You're married. You're... His face twisted with betrayal so profound it made my own chest ache. You lied. About everything. Your name, your life, who you were. Was any of it real? It was all real, I said desperately, reaching for him, but he jerked away. Kieran, please, let me explain. Explain? Kale's voice cut through the air like a blade. He was looking at his brother now, and there was something dangerous in his expression. Explain how you've been bedding my... He stopped himself, jaw clenching so hard I could see the muscle jump. The queen is married to the king. She's mine to protect, mine to serve, and you... Yours. Kieran's laugh was ugly. She's mine. She's been mine for 6 months. She carries my child. He froze, his eyes going wide as he looked at me, really looked at me, at the way I was standing between them, at the guilt written all over my face, at the secret I could no longer hide. Oh gods, the way you looked at each other in the corridor last night, the tension. I thought you were just being formal, but you... His hand went to his sword. You've been with him too. Kieran, don't... But it was too late. He drew his blade, the steel singing as it cleared the scabbard, and leveled it at his brother. You touched her. You touched my mate. Kale's sword was out in the next breath, both of them falling into fighting stances I'd seen 1,000 times in the training yard. Your mate? She's the queen, brother. She's under my protection, my sworn duty, and I... His voice cracked. I felt the bond. 6 months ago it snapped into place, and I've been dying slowly ever since, knowing I could never have her. And you've had her this whole time without even knowing who she was? That's what makes it worse, Kieran roared. She could have been anyone, could have been free with me, but she's... His blade trembled. You always get everything, Kyle. The position, the honor, the respect. For once I had something that was just mine, and you took her from me. I didn't take anything. I didn't even know... They lunged at each other, steel clashing with steel, and I felt something inside me snap. Power surged up from my core, the alpha authority I'd been suppressing since I left the castle. And when I shouted, "Stop!" the word echoed through the forest like a physical force. Both brothers froze mid-strike, their wolves responding to the command, even as their human minds rebelled against it. "Lower your weapons," I said, and my voice didn't sound like my own. It sounded like a queen, like an alpha, like someone who could hold a kingdom together through sheer force of will. "Both of you." Now. They obeyed, but they didn't sheath their swords, didn't take their eyes off each other. The tension between them was a living thing, violent and heartbreaking. "You want the truth?" I stepped between them, forcing them to look at me instead of each other. "Here it is. I'm pregnant. 8 weeks, maybe 9, and I don't know which one of you is the father." Kieran made a wounded sound. Cale went absolutely still. "That's why I'm riding to Shadowed Keep," I continued, my voice shaking now that the alpha command had faded. "There's a creature there, a lunar wolf dog with ancient magic. He can read bloodlines, determine paternity. I was going to find out the truth and then—" I laughed bitterly. "I don't know. Tell one of you? Run away? Pretend none of this happened? You should have told us," Kyle said quietly. "You should have trusted us with the truth from the beginning." "Trusted you?" The words burst out of me, sharp and raw. "Trusted you with what, exactly? That I felt the mate bond with you, Cale? And thought I was losing my mind because I was married and it was impossible? That I met Kieran in the forest and felt the same bond and thought I was cursed? That I love you both so completely it's tearing me apart?" I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the mild air. There is no precedent for this. No law, no legend, no story where one woman gets 2 mates and everyone lives happily. I'm going to Shadowed Keep because I need to know. I need the universe to tell me which one of you was the mistake. "And if neither of us was a mistake?" Cale asked softly. I looked at him, then at Kieran, seeing the mirror image of pain in their identical faces. Then we're all doomed. The rest of the journey was silent. They insisted on accompanying me. Protecting me, they said, though I suspected they just couldn't let me out of their sight. We rode in a triangle formation, me at the point, the brothers flanking me but staying as far from each other as possible. The forest grew darker as we traveled, the trees older and more twisted, until even the birds stopped singing, and the only sound was our horses' hooves on increasingly rocky ground. Shadowed Keep appeared through the mist, like something from a nightmare or a fairy tale. The fortress was massive, built from black stone that seemed to swallow light, covered in ivy so dark it looked like liquid shadow creeping up the walls. Fog rolled around its base in thick coils, never lifting, never dissipating, just endlessly circling. The air here tasted different, metallic and sharp, like storms and magic and things that shouldn't exist. The gates opened as we approached. Just opened. No guards, no challenge, just ancient iron groaning on hinges that should have rusted through centuries ago. Our horses balked, refusing to go further, so we dismounted and walked the last 100 yards on foot. That's when I saw him. Asher Twilight Paw wasn't a dog. Calling him that felt like calling the ocean a puddle. He was massive, easily the size of a war horse, with fur that seemed to shift between silver and white depending on how the light hit it. Except there was no light here, just the ambient glow that came from the creature himself. His eyes were ancient, deep blue going on purple, and they looked at me like they could see past flesh and bone straight to my soul. Runes were carved into his fur, not painted or tattooed, but somehow part of him, glowing with soft blue light that pulsed in rhythm with his breathing. When his voice entered my mind, it wasn't like hearing. It was like remembering something I'd always known. Alpha Queen, Iron Heart blood, twice bonded, the prophecy walks. Cale and Kieran both staggered, hands going to their temples. "You can hear him too?" Kieran gasped. "Impossible," Cale breathed. "Mate bonds don't work like this. One bond, one mate. It's the law of nature." Asher moved around us in a slow circle, his massive paws silent on the stone courtyard. He smelled like moonlight and snow and something ancient that made my wolf want to bow down. He sniffed each of us in turn, Kieran first, then Cale, then spending long moments with his nose pressed to my stomach, his breath warm through my clothes. The runes on his body pulsed brighter. "Come." It wasn't a request. He turned and walked toward the keep's entrance, and we followed because there was nothing else to do. The doors opened before him like they were alive, and we stepped into a circular chamber so large I couldn't see where the walls ended. The floor was engraved with symbols I didn't recognize. concentric circles within circles, all leading to a raised stone altar in the center. And standing beside that altar, looking like he'd been waiting for years instead of hours, was Darius Shadowbane. "You came," he said, and his smile was satisfied, knowing, like we'd passed some test. "Finally, exactly as the prophecy foretold." "What prophecy?" I demanded. "Darius, what is this place? Why did you send me here?" But it was Asher who answered, his voice echoing in all our minds simultaneously. "The truth you seek is not about paternity. It is about destiny." The symbols on the floor began to glow, blue light rising like dawn, spreading outward from the altar until it surrounded us in a perfect circle. We were trapped inside it, the four of us, me, Kale, Kieran, and Darius, watching from just beyond the boundary. "What's happening?" Kieran's hand found mine instinctively, and on my other side, Kale did the same. I held both their hands, feeling the mate bond singing between us, feeling it grow stronger as the magic intensified. Darius stepped closer to the circle's edge, his expression almost gentle. "The lunar wolf dog can see bloodlines. Yes, can determine paternity. But that's not why you're here." He looked at me, at the brothers, at our joined hands. "You're here because 1,000 years ago, the last Trinity bond walked this earth. Two souls split into twin bodies, destined to love one queen. When the bond manifests, it creates a child of both fathers, blood shared, essence mingled, power multiplied." "That's impossible," Kyle said, but his voice was weak. "Impossible." Asher's laugh echoed through my skull. "Yet here you stand, twice bonded, twice mated, carrying a child made of three." The circle pulsed with light, bright enough to blind, and Asher threw back his head and howled. The sound was nothing earthly. It was prophecy and magic, an ancient knowing all rolled into one supernatural note. The light exploded outward, consuming us all, and in that brilliance, I heard Darius's voice one last time. "The truth you seek isn't about which father. It's about accepting what fate has given you. The Trinity bond cannot be denied, cannot be broken, cannot be chosen." His smile was the last thing I saw before the light swallowed everything. "Your destiny was sealed before you were even born, all three of you, and what waits beyond this revelation will either unite you or destroy everything you love. Magic doesn't lie." And when the lunar wolf dog opened his mouth and spoke with the voice of 1,000 ancestors, I knew. The impossible choice I feared making was never mine to make. Destiny had already chosen, and its choice was more cruel and more beautiful than I could have imagined. The light from Asher's ritual circle pulsed around us like a living heartbeat, blue and silver, and something that had no name in any language I knew. I could feel it crawling over my skin, seeping through my clothes, searching for something deep inside me. Kale's hand tightened around mine on one side, Kieran's on the other, and through our joined grip I could feel their fear matching my own. The three of us stood frozen in that ancient chamber, while Darius watched from beyond the circle's edge, his expression that of a man witnessing prophecy fulfill itself. Asher moved closer, his massive body circling us with predatory grace. Up close, he was even more terrifying. Each rune carved into his silver fur seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat, and his eyes held the weight of centuries. When he pressed his nose to my stomach, breathing deep, the warmth of his breath penetrated through my leather vest and linen shirt, reaching the tiny life growing inside me. I felt the baby respond, a flutter so faint I might have imagined it except for the way Asher's entire body went still. "There it is," Darius said softly from outside the circle. "The Trinity's child. Do you see it, Asher? Do you see what they've created?" The wolf dog lifted his head, and his voice echoed through all our minds simultaneously, rich and ancient and absolutely certain. "Two fathers, one womb, one soul split between twin hearts, reunited in the flesh of their offspring. The last time this occurred was 1,000 years ago, when the northern kingdoms nearly fell to darkness. The Trinity bond saved them then. It will save them again." "No," Kale's voice was strained. "Mate bonds don't work like this. The moon goddess gives each wolf one mate, one bond, one chance at completion. What you're describing is impossible." Asher's growl reverberated through the stone floor beneath our feet. The runes on his body blazed brighter, shifting from blue to white-hot silver. And suddenly, the world dissolved. I was no longer in the chamber. I was in Kale's memory, living it as if it were my own, feeling what he'd felt, seeing through his eyes. I was standing in the great hall of the castle 5 years ago, watching a woman descend the grand staircase on King Aldrich's arm. My breath, Chaol's breath, caught in my throat because she was beautiful in a way that made everything else fade. Dark hair falling in waves, storm-gray eyes that met mine across the crowded room, and in that instant, the mate bond snapped into place like a physical blow. I staggered, one hand going to my chest where it felt like something had grabbed my heart and squeezed. Mine. She was mine. The moon goddess had chosen her for me, and I knew it with every fiber of my being. But she was also the new queen, Aldrich's wife, untouchable by law, by honor, by every code I'd sworn to uphold as captain of the guard. I watched her smile politely at the nobles who greeted her, watched her play the role of royal consort, and I made a vow right there in that moment. I would never touch her, never act on the bond that was tearing me apart from the inside. I would protect her, serve her, die for her if necessary, but I would not dishonor her by claiming what I had no right to possess. The memory shifted, jumped forward to a night 3 months ago. We were in the training yard, late, after everyone else had gone to bed. She'd asked for extra lessons, claimed she needed to stay sharp, but I knew the truth. She needed escape as much as I did. We'd been circling each other for months, the tension building, the mate bond growing stronger every day we denied it. That night, she'd had too much wine at dinner, was loose and laughing in a way she never was around the court. When she stumbled during a complex maneuver, I caught her by the waist, and suddenly we were pressed together in the torchlight, her breath coming fast, her eyes dilated. "If you were anyone else," I heard myself whisper, my thumb brushing just beneath her ribs where I could feel her heart racing. "I would," but someone called my name from across the yard, and the moment shattered. She'd pulled away, walls slamming back into place, and we'd never spoken of it again. The memory released me, and I was gasping, staggering in the circle because I'd just lived Chaol's entire experience of the mate bond. I'd felt his restraint, his honor, his agony, and then the world shifted again. This time I was Kieran. I was walking through the forest 6 months ago, checking trap lines, when I caught a scent on the wind that made my wolf sit up and take notice. Female, shifter, distressed. I followed it to a small clearing where a woman sat on a fallen log with her head in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. She wore a plain cloak, common clothes, but there was something about her that drew me like gravity. "Are you all right?" I asked. And when she looked up, the mate bond hit me so hard I nearly fell to my knees. Those eyes, storm gray and full of pain, locked onto mine, and I knew, this woman, this stranger, was mine, given to me by the moon goddess herself. "I'm Kieran," I heard myself say. "Tell me who hurt you." "Raven," she whispered, and I didn't know it was a lie. Didn't know she was running from a crown instead of an arranged marriage. All I knew was that she needed protection, needed freedom, needed someone to make her smile again. So I gave her that. I gave her the forest and laughter and a place where she could be herself, instead of whatever role others had forced her into. The memory jumped to the first time we made love, stars visible through the canopy above us, her skin silvered by moonlight as she moved above me. "You're exactly what I needed," she'd gasped, and I'd believed her because she was exactly what I needed too. Someone who was just mine. Someone who chose me not because of my name or my position, but because of who I was in the darkness. The memory released me, and I was drowning in Kieran's emotions. The pure joy he'd felt, the uncomplicated love, the certainty that he'd finally found his place in the world. And then the perspective shifted one more time. This time I was seeing myself, feeling my own memories as if from outside my body. I watched myself at that first meeting with Chaol 5 years ago, feeling the bond snap into place and thinking I was going insane because I was married, because mate bonds weren't supposed to happen to people who were already claimed. I'd spent months convincing myself it was stress, was trauma from my loveless marriage, was anything other than what it actually was. And then I'd met Kieran in the forest, and when the bond hit me a second time, I'd been certain I was broken, cursed, wrong in some fundamental way. She thought she was defective. Asher's voice echoed through the memory. She thought the moon goddess had abandoned her or punished her. She never considered that she might be blessed. The memories released us all at once, and we collapsed to our knees in the circle, gasping and disoriented. I could taste salt on my lips, tears I didn't remember crying. Beside me, Chaol had his head bowed, and Kieran was making a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. "Now you understand," Darius said quietly, The bond isn't broken. It's expanded. Two souls meant to share one mate, because apart they are incomplete, but together they are whole. Asher moved to the center of our circle, his massive paws deliberate. He looked at each of us in turn, and then he did something impossible. He showed us a vision of the child inside me, not through memory this time, but through some other sight, some magic that let us see the tiny spark of life as it truly was. And it was divided, not split or broken, but beautifully, impossibly dual. Half of the essence glowed with Kale's amber light, steady and strong. The other half shimmered with Kieran's wilder silver. And at the center, where they met, was something entirely new. My own stormy gray, binding them together. The child is of both. Asher spoke directly into our minds. Blood of twins, womb of queen, blessed by the moon goddess. Trinity bond, rarest of all gifts, most dangerous of all powers. No. Kale stood abruptly, his hands clenched into fists. You're asking me to share my mate, to divide my heart with my own brother, to accept that I'll never be enough on my own. I can't. His voice cracked. I won't do that to him. And what about me? Kieran was on his feet now too, and there was fury in his eyes. I'm supposed to accept being half of a king, sharing the woman I love with someone who's always been better than me at everything, standing in his shadow for the rest of my life? She's not something to be divided, Kale shot back. She's right here, I said quietly, but they were beyond hearing me. The anger and pain they'd been suppressing since the clearing erupted now, here in this sacred space. Kieran swung first, his fist connecting with Kale's jaw with a crack that made me flinch. Kale retaliated immediately, and suddenly they were fighting in earnest. Not with weapons, but with fists and rage, and all the hurt they couldn't put into words. Stop. I tried to step between them, but Kieran was already mid-swing. He didn't see me, didn't realize I was there until his elbow caught me across the cheekbone. The pain was sharp and immediate, and I felt something warm trickle down my face. Blood. They both froze instantly. The scent of my blood in the air triggered something primal in them, some deep instinct that went beyond conscious thought. They moved as one, dropping to their knees on either side of me, hands hovering over my face but not quite touching, afraid to hurt me further. Gods, I'm sorry, Kieran breathed, his fingers trembling as they traced the air just above my cheek. I didn't mean, it's not deep. Kale was examining the cut with a warrior's practicality, but his voice shook. But if I'd been slower, if I hadn't pulled back, you both stopped, I said softly. You both protected me. Together. They looked at each other over my head, and something passed between them, some wordless communication that only brothers who'd shared a womb could understand. Asher's approval rumbled through the chamber like distant thunder. Now you begin to see, Darius said. The prophecy speaks of darkness coming from the north, an army of wolves corrupted by black magic, twisted beyond recognition. They will sweep through the northern territories, burning everything in their path, and only the Trinity can stop them. The Queen as general, the twins as her blades, the child as a symbol of unity strong enough to rally the kingdoms. And if we refuse? Kieran asked, though his hand had found mine and was gripping it like a lifeline. Darius's expression turned grave. He raised one hand, and the air above us shimmered. Images formed in the smoke, terrible images. The castle burning, bodies in the streets. Me chained to a stake while flames licked at my feet, accused of adultery and treason. Kale and Kieran killing each other in single combat. Mate bonds driving them insane without me to anchor them. And the child, gods, the child, never born, never given a chance to save anyone. That is the future if you deny the Trinity. Asher spoke. Destruction, death, darkness consuming all light. Then we never had a choice, Kale said, his voice broken. Not really. No, I agreed quietly. But maybe that's not what matters. I knelt between them, taking both their hands in mine. The mate bond hummed between all three of us, a complex harmony instead of a simple duet. When I spoke, my voice was steady even though my heart was hammering. Kale, you gave me strength when I felt weak, discipline when I was lost. You saw me as a queen, as a leader, as your equal, even when I didn't see it myself. You made me believe I could rule, could be more than just a crown on someone else's head. I squeezed his hand, feeling the calluses from his sword, the warmth of his skin. You made me want to be better. I turned to Kieran, and you gave me freedom when I was caged, joy when I'd forgotten how to smile. You saw me as a woman, as a wolf, as myself stripped of all the titles and expectations. You reminded me that beneath the crown, I was still just Nyx, still someone who could run through the forest and laugh at stupid jokes and feel alive. Tears were running down my face now, but I didn't care. You made me remember who I was before they tried to make me into something else. I looked between them, at their identical amber eyes, both fixed on me with identical expressions of desperate hope. I need both of you, and this child needs both of you. But I won't force a bond that destroys brothers. I won't make you share if it means you'll hate each other, hate me, hate what we could be together. So I'm asking, can you do this? Can you love me together instead of tearing each other apart? The silence stretched so long I thought I might break. And then Kyle spoke, his voice rough. I've spent 5 years loving you from a distance, watching you, protecting you, dying slowly because I couldn't have you. And I thought that was my fate, to want something I could never possess. He looked at his brother. But if the choice is having half of her or none of her at all, if the choice is my brother at my side or as my enemy, he drew a shaking breath. I choose her. I choose us. All of us. Kieran's laugh was watery. I've always lived in your shadow, brother. Always been the wilder one, the less responsible one, the one who never quite measured up. I thought finding Raven, finding her, was my chance to have something that was just mine. He looked at me, then at Kale. But she's not just mine. She's ours, and maybe that's what I was missing all along. Not someone to call my own, but a family to belong to. He gripped both our hands tighter. If she carries my child, our child, then we're family. All of us. And family doesn't abandon each other. Asher's howl split the air, triumphant and ancient. The circle beneath us exploded with silver light, so bright I had to close my eyes. When I opened them, the runes on the floor were moving, rearranging themselves into a new pattern. 3 circles overlapping in the center, creating a 4th shape where they intersected. The Trinity accepts, Asher intoned. Now seal the bond. Mark each other. Let the moon goddess witness what has been made whole. Kale moved first, pulling me into his arms with a gentleness that belied his strength. Are you sure? He whispered against my hair. Once this is done, there's no going back. I've never been more sure of anything. I breathed, and tilted my head to expose the right side of my neck. His teeth were sharp when they sank into my skin, sharp enough to break through, but not enough to truly hurt. The pain was bright and clean, and then it transformed into something else. Pleasure so intense it made my knees weak, magic pouring through the bite mark like molten silver. I felt him in my head, in my heart, in every cell of my body. His honor, his strength, his unwavering devotion. The bond snapped into place permanently, irrevocably, and I gasped against his shoulder. When he pulled back, Kieran was already there, turning me gently to face him. My turn, he said with that wild grin I loved, and then his teeth were in the left side of my neck, marking me as his. The sensation was different, wilder, hotter, like lightning instead of steady flame, but just as overwhelming. I felt his joy, his freedom, his fierce protective love flooding through me. The second bond locked into place, and suddenly I could feel both of them at once, their emotions and thoughts brushing against mine. Now you mark us, Kyle said, and they both knelt before me, heads tilted to expose their throats. I marked Kale first, my teeth finding the junction of his neck and shoulder, tasting copper and salt, and him. His hand came up to cradle my head, holding me there while the bond sealed. Then Kieran, whose mark I placed on the exact same spot on the opposite side. When my teeth broke his skin, he made a sound that was half groan, half laugh, and I felt his happiness explode through the bond like sunshine. The 3 of us collapsed together as the ritual completed, tangled in each other's arms while silver light cascaded over us like rain. I could feel them now, not just near me but in me, part of me. Their hearts beat in time with mine. Their breath matched my rhythm. We were separate people, but we were also one unit, one force, one unbreakable thing. It is done, Asher said with satisfaction. The Trinity bond is sealed, and that's when the doors exploded inward. Armed guards poured into the chamber, at least 20 of them, their armor bearing the royal crest. They surrounded us with swords drawn, and through the chaos I saw him, King Aldrich, his face twisted with rage and righteousness, stepping over the threshold like an avenging angel. Adulteress, he spat, pointing at me. I knew you were unfaithful. I knew you were a whore. And here's the proof. lying with 2 men, marked like a common bitch in heat. I struggled to my feet, Kale and Kieran moving to flank me protectively. "Aldrich, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly." His smile was vicious. "You're under arrest for adultery, treason, and conspiracy against the crown. The penalty is death, public execution by fire, so the whole kingdom can watch their false queen burn." He looked at Kale and Kieran with contempt. "And you two, Captain Ironheart and his bastard brother, are charged with despoiling the queen and assaulting the dignity of the throne. You'll be executed as well. Beheading, I think, quick and clean, because unlike her, you served the kingdom before you betrayed it." "No." The word came out steady, strong, infused with alpha command. "You have no authority here, Aldrich. Our marriage was invalid from the start. You were already wed to another when you took me as your bride. That makes you the criminal, not me." His eyes widened, then narrowed. "Lies. You have no proof." "I do," Darius said, stepping forward with papers in his hand. "Documentation of your first marriage to Lady Alara of the Eastern Isles, contracted 7 years before you wed Queen Nyx. You're a bigamist, Aldrich, which means Nyx was never truly your wife. She's free. She always has been." For a moment I thought Aldrich might attack Darius himself, but then his expression shifted, calculating. "Even if that's true, and I'm not conceding that it is, you're still guilty of fornication with subordinates, still guilty of carrying a bastard, still guilty of bringing shame to the throne. Then I'll stand trial," I said, publicly. "Let the people decide if I deserve to burn." Aldrich's smile returned, cold and certain. "Oh, they will. And when they see what you've done, they'll beg me to light the pyre myself." The guards surged forward, and even with the Trinity bond singing between us, even with Kale and Kieran fighting at my sides, we were outnumbered. They dragged us apart, shackled us with iron that burned against our newly marked skin, and as they hauled me toward the door, I felt the bond stretching, straining, screaming at the separation. "I will find you," Kale shouted as they dragged him the opposite direction. "We will find you. This isn't over." "It's just beginning," Kieran agreed, his voice carrying over the chaos. "We're coming, Nyx. We're coming." And as they threw me into the back of a prisoner transport, as the shadowed keep grew smaller in the distance, I pressed my hand to my stomach and whispered to the child growing there, "Hold on, little one. Your fathers and I have a kingdom to save, and no one, not Aldrich, not prophecy, not even death itself, is going to stop us from giving you the world you deserve." They wanted to burn me for loving 2 men, but the fire they lit wasn't for punishment. It was for rebirth, and when the flames rose, it wasn't a queen who emerged. It was a goddess, and I wasn't alone. The crowd in the public square was massive, thousands of faces blurring together in a sea of judgment and curiosity. They'd come to watch their queen burn, come to see justice served against the woman who'd dared to break her vows, who'd sullied the crown with her lust. The wooden stakes they'd chained us to were rough against my back, splinters digging through my thin prisoner's shift. To my left, Kale stood rigid and silent, his jaw set in that way that meant he was preparing for death. To my right, Kieran was fighting his chains, snarling at any guard who came close, his wolf barely contained beneath his skin. Through the Trinity bond, I felt them both, Kale's resigned acceptance warring with his fury at being unable to protect me, Kieran's wild desperation to break free and save us all. And beneath both their emotions, I felt their love for me burning steady as a star, unshakable even in the face of execution. King Aldrich stood on a platform before us, resplendent in his royal robes, playing the part of wronged husband to perfection. His voice carried across the square, amplified by the acoustics of the buildings surrounding us. "Citizens of the Northern Territories," he intoned, "you have gathered here today to witness justice. This woman," he pointed at me with theatrical disgust, "who wore the crown of your queen, has betrayed not only her marriage vows, but the sacred trust you placed in her. She has lain with 2 men, conceived a bastard child, and brought shame upon our kingdom." The crowd roared its approval, and I felt Kieran flinch beside me. Through the bond, I sent him what comfort I could. "I love you. Whatever happens, I love you both." "The penalty for such treachery is clear," Aldrich continued. "Death by fire, so that her corruption might be cleansed from this world and serve as warning to any who would follow her path." He looked at Kale and Kieran with cold satisfaction. "And these 2, Captain Kale Ironheart and his brother Kieran, who violated their oaths and dishonored their positions will be executed by beheading immediately following the Queen's death. I saw Darius in the crowd, trying to push forward, his face desperate. He was shouting something about documents, about proof of Aldrich's crimes, but the guards held him back. No one was listening. They wanted their spectacle, their righteous burning. Any last words, Your Majesty? Aldrich's use of my title was mocking. I looked at Cale, then at Kieran. If we die, Kieran said quietly, his voice somehow reaching me over the noise of the crowd. We die together. And our child dies with honor, Cale added, his eyes meeting mine. Not in shame. Never in shame. I wanted to tell them so many things. That they'd given me more in 6 months than I'd had in a lifetime. That I didn't regret a single moment. A single choice. That if I could go back and do it all again, I would change nothing. But my throat was too tight with unshed tears, and all I could do was mouth the words, I love you, both of you, always. Aldrich nodded to the executioner, a hooded figure holding a lit torch. Light the pyre. The executioner touched the torch to the kindling piled around our feet. The dry wood caught immediately, flames spreading with terrifying speed. Smoke rose in thick coils, acrid and choking. I felt the heat starting to build, felt the first licks of fire reaching toward my legs, and some distant part of my mind noted with dark humor that at least it would be quick, that at least I wouldn't have to watch Cale and Kieran die. But when the flames touched my skin, something happened. Instead of burning, I felt something else, a surge of power so profound it made me gasp. It was like the Trinity bond had been a door I didn't know existed, and the fire was a key turning in a lock. Memories flooded through me, but they weren't mine. They were older, ancient, belonging to women who'd lived and died centuries before I was born. I saw them, my ancestors, the Lunar queens, women with silver eyes and moon marks on their skin, women who could command the elements, who walked between the mortal world and the realm of spirits. They'd been hunted, killed, their bloodline nearly destroyed because people feared their power. But some had survived, hidden their abilities, passed the gift down through generations of daughters who never knew what they carried in their blood. Until now, the Trinity bond wasn't just a romantic connection. It was a conduit, the love of two mates, the power of twins sharing their strength. It had awakened something in me that had been sleeping my entire life. Magic, not the dark corruption that threatened from the north, but the ancient, pure magic of the moon goddess herself. The marks on my neck where Cale and Kieran had bitten me began to glow, silver light so bright it cut through the smoke. I felt them through the bond, felt their power flooding into me, amplifying what I already possessed. Separately, we were strong. Together, we were unstoppable. And that's when Asher appeared. He came through the crowd like a ghost, like a dream made solid, his massive body phasing through people as if they weren't there. He threw back his head and howled, the sound echoing off the buildings. And above us, the sun was suddenly eclipsed by clouds that hadn't been there a moment before. The full moon appeared in the daytime sky, impossible and perfect, and its light fell on me like a benediction. Power exploded outward from my body, the chains holding me shattered, metal shrieking as it tore apart. The flames around me didn't extinguish. They transformed, turning from orange and red to pure silver, cold fire that illuminated but didn't burn. When I opened my eyes, I knew they were glowing the same silver as the flames, as the moon above, as the marks on my neck. Beside me, Cale and Kieran's chains were breaking too, their own transformations taking hold. They shifted partially, their wolves emerging. Not fully, but enough. Their eyes glowed amber, their teeth elongated, their bodies growing larger and more powerful. They moved to flank me, one on each side, no longer prisoners but guardians, their combined presence a wall of predatory strength. The crowd went silent. Even Aldrich stood frozen on his platform, his face pale. I stepped down from the stake, my bare feet touching ground that should have been scalding with embers but felt cool beneath me. My voice, when I spoke, didn't sound entirely human. It echoed with harmonics that shouldn't have been possible, with the voices of all the Lunar queens who'd come before me, with the power of the Trinity bond making me more than I'd ever been alone. I am Nyx Ravenclaw, I said, and my words carried across the square without shouting, reaching every ear. Queen by blood, alpha by right, maid of two, mother of prophecy, and I reject your chains. Seize her, Aldrich screamed, but his guards didn't move. They were staring at me with expressions somewhere between terror and awe, and not one of them reached for their weapons. You have no authority here, Aldrich. Darius finally broke through the crowd, clutching documents in his hands. Your marriage to Nyx was never valid. 7 years before you wed her, you married Lady Alara of the Eastern Isles in a secret ceremony. You're a bigamist and a fraud. He thrust the papers toward the Council of Elders, old men and women who'd been watching from a reserved section of the crowd. They took the documents with trembling hands, passed them between themselves, and I watched their faces change as they read the proof. It's true, the eldest spoke, her voice carrying despite her age. King Aldrich was already married when he took Queen Nyx as his bride. Their union was never legitimate under the laws of gods or men, which means she turned to look at me, and slowly, deliberately, she knelt. Which means Queen Nyx was free. Her children are not bastards, and her bonds with the Ironheart twins are her right to make. One by one, the other elders knelt. Then members of the crowd began to follow, a wave of submission spreading through the square as people recognized what they were seeing. Not a fallen queen, but a rising goddess. The Trinity made flesh. The fulfillment of prophecy they'd heard in stories but never believed they'd witness. Aldrich looked around wildly, seeing his power crumbling. This is madness. She's a witch. She's corrupted these men with dark magic. The only corruption here is yours. I walked toward him, and he stumbled backward. Kale and Kieran moved with me, our steps synchronized, our wolves aligned. You lied to take a throne that wasn't yours. You kept me prisoner in a loveless marriage. You denied me the mates the moon goddess intended for me. And now you'll face justice. I didn't have to order his arrest. The guards moved in on their own, seizing Aldrich by the arms, removing the crown from his head. He struggled and cursed, but he looked small now, pathetic. A man who'd built his power on lies and was watching it all collapse. I climbed the platform where he'd stood, looking out at my people. Truly my people now, not his. The Trinity bond is sacred, I declared. Rare, but blessed by the moon goddess herself. I claim the throne not as Aldrich's widow, but as the rightful Alpha Queen of the Northern Territories. And I name Kale Ironheart and Kieran Ironheart as my king consorts, equal partners in rule, equal fathers to the child I carry. There was a moment of shocked silence, and then someone in the crowd shouted, "The Lunar Queen!" Others took up the call, and soon it was a chant. Lunar Queen! Trinity bond! Lunar Queen! Through our bond, I felt Kale's pride and Kieran's joy, and I sent back my own overwhelming love. We'd survived. Against all odds, we'd survived. And the real work was just beginning. The months that followed passed in a blur of activity. The corrupted army from the north was real, just as the prophecy had warned. Twisted wolves driven mad by dark magic, led by a sorcerer who wanted to consume the northern territories and use them as a springboard to conquer the entire continent. We trained our own forces day and night, Kale drilling them in tactics and strategy, while Kieran taught them to fight dirty, to use the terrain, to be unpredictable. And me, I learned to use the power that had awakened in me. Darius became my teacher, revealing that he'd been a guardian of the old ways, waiting his entire life for a lunar queen to emerge. The magic was intuitive once I stopped fighting it. I could sense the corrupted wolves from miles away, could purify water and land they'd tainted, could heal wounds that should have been fatal. But more than the magic, more than the power, what sustained me was them, my mates, my kings. We learned to navigate the complexity of our bond, the three of us figuring out how to love each other without jealousy or competition. It helped that Kale and Kieran were different enough that they filled different needs. Kale was my anchor, steady and strong, the one I turned to when I needed to feel grounded. Kieran was my wind, wild and free, the one who made me laugh when the weight of the crown grew too heavy. And at night, in the privacy of our shared chambers, we learned how 3 people could become one unit without losing their individual selves. It was awkward at first, moments of uncertainty about who should be where and when. But the bond guided us, letting us feel each other's desires and boundaries, and slowly we created something beautiful and unprecedented. A love that was both romantic and fraternal, passionate and peaceful, that felt less like a compromise and more like a completion. My pregnancy advanced, my belly swelling with the child we'd all created. There were moments of humor, too, like when I couldn't decide which of them to ask for help with my boots, and ended up with one on each foot, both of them on their knees arguing good-naturedly about proper lacing technique. Or the time Kieran brought me wild strawberries from the forest, and Kale arrived at the same moment with strawberry pastries from the castle kitchens. both of them having felt my craving through the bond, without realizing the other had the same idea. The bond worked both ways, of course. I felt their occasional moments of insecurity, Cale wondering if he was too serious, too rigid compared to his brother's easy charm. Kieran worrying that he wasn't sophisticated enough, wasn't worthy of standing beside a queen. I learned to soothe those fears without them having to speak them aloud, sending reassurance and love through the bond until their worry faded. We were still preparing fortifications when my water broke. The contractions started during a war council meeting, a sudden cramping that made me gasp and grab the edge of the strategy table. Cale was at my side instantly, his hand supporting my lower back, while Kieran was already shouting for the midwives. The corrupted army was only 3 days' march away, the scouts had reported. We didn't have time for this, but babies, apparently, don't care about military strategy. The labor was long and difficult. The child was large, 2 fathers' worth of strength packed into one tiny body, and she was stubborn about entering the world. I labored through the night and into the next day, Cale holding my left hand and Kieran my right, both of them feeding me strength through the bond when my own threatened to give out. "You can do this," Cale murmured, his lips against my temple. "You're the strongest person I've ever known. Our daughter's just as stubborn as her mother," Kieran added with a strained laugh. "She'll come when she's ready to make an entrance." And finally, after what felt like days but was probably only hours, I felt the shift. "One more push," the midwife urged, and I bore down with everything I had left. The pain peaked and then suddenly released, and there was a sound that made my heart stop and restart. A baby's cry, high and clear and furious at being ejected from her warm nest. "A girl," the midwife announced, and I watched through tears as she placed my daughter on my chest. Our daughter, small and perfect, and absolutely covered in the vernix and blood of birth, but beautiful beyond words. She had a cap of dark hair like mine, and when she opened her eyes to glare at the world that had so rudely disturbed her, they were amber, the exact shade of her father's eyes, and there, on her forehead, was a mark, a crescent moon, silver against her pink skin, proof of the magic that ran through her veins. Asher appeared in the doorway, making the midwives jump, but I just laughed weakly. The great wolf dog padded into the room, sniffed delicately at the baby, and then lifted his head and howled, a sound of pure triumph. "The Trinity is complete," his voice echoed in our minds. "The darkness will fall. Celine," I whispered, looking down at my daughter. "Celine Ravenclaw Ironheart. Our moonlight." Kyle kissed my forehead, his hand gentle on Celine's tiny head. Kieran was openly crying, his fierce warrior's face transformed by wonder. Through the bond, their love for me and for our daughter flooded every corner of my awareness, so intense I could barely breathe. "She's perfect," Kieran breathed. "God's nix. She's absolutely perfect. Like her mother," Cale said, and I laughed despite my exhaustion. A week later, I stood on the castle battlements with Celine sleeping in a sling against my chest, her tiny fist curled against my heart. The corrupted army was visible on the horizon now, a dark stain spreading across the landscape. They'd be here by tomorrow night. Cale stood to my left, his hand resting on my shoulder, his captain's uniform immaculate, and his sword strapped to his side. Kieran was on my right, his arm wrapped around my waist, dressed in the forest leathers he preferred, even now that he was a king. Between them I felt invincible. "Ready for this?" Kieran asked, his tone light but his eyes serious. "Juntos? Sempre," Cale answered, and I smiled at his use of the old language. "Together? Always. I didn't choose one of you," I said quietly, looking out at the approaching darkness. "I chose all 3 of us. I chose this impossible family, this love that defies every rule and tradition, and for that choice, I'll fight until my last breath." We touched foreheads, the 3 of us, a gesture Kieran had taught me from his time in the forest, the wolf's way of showing affection, of pledging loyalty. Celine squirmed between us, and we broke apart laughing, adjusting so she was comfortable again. In the distance, Asher howled. The sound carried on the wind, a promise and a warning. The prophecy was unfolding exactly as it should. They'd called me a traitor for loving 2 men, but I hadn't betrayed anything. I'd created something new, a family that shouldn't exist but did anyway, held together by bonds stronger than steel and twice as unbreakable. An impossible love that defied every rule they'd tried to impose on me. And when the historians wrote their accounts of what happened here, they wouldn't say I chose wrong. They'd say I chose courage. They'd say the Lunar Queen and her Trinity saved the northern territories from darkness. They'd say we changed the world. My children, yes, children plural, because I could already feel through the bond that there would be more, would grow up in a kingdom where love had no limits, only possibilities, where mate bonds could take whatever form the moon goddess designed, without judgment or shame, where queens could be warriors and lovers and mothers all at once, without having to choose. The Lunar Queen would rule, the Trinity would stand united, and the darkness that thought to consume us would learn to fear the light. I pressed my lips to Selene's forehead, feeling the moon mark warm beneath my kiss, and tightened my grip on both my kings. Tomorrow we would fight. Tonight we had won something more important than any battle. We'd won the right to exist exactly as we were, impossible and perfect, and ours. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of the coming storm. I smiled into it, fierce and unafraid. Let them come. We were ready.